Bill Gates is quoted as saying, "Busy is the new stupid." And my guest today, Conrad Ruiz, is the founder and CEO of Well Aware, and he likens busyness to a drug, and that we chase busyness to feel those dopamine hits nonstop. He talks about that. He talks about time blocking, talks about how multitasking is an absolute farce. But we also chop it up around all kinds of things, business and otherwise, including health. So enjoy this episode and get ready, because this guy is wise well beyond his years, and this was a fun one. On today's episode of the ThriveMore podcast, I have the pleasure of interviewing Conrad Ruiz. He helps business owners buy back their time using systems, frameworks, virtual assistants, and a well-engineered self-reviewing process. He's the founder and CEO of Well Aware. You know, his story actually evolves from a particular lack of time at the age of 17. He was diagnosed with having only one kidney. And on top of that, his father was 70 years older than he was. So he sensed the pressure of the time that originally had him sprinting against the clock. He's since learned, and he shares this now, that success and happiness come from a patience for order and a sustainable awareness of what really matters. So with that, and no further ado, welcome to the ThriveMore show, Conrad.
Roger, so grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh man, I can't wait for this one. I had the pleasure of speaking with Conrad a little while ago, and was able to get him on the show. So this is going to be a great episode, I can tell you. He has a lot of value to bring. But Conrad, let's start the conversation today, kind of right off the bat, with your company, Well Aware. What do you do, and how does that serve business owners or individuals?
Grateful to answer that question, Roger. Well Aware, as I like to put it, is a time management consulting firm.
Okay.
I live to help others buy back their time. And in a particular way, I live to help others buy back their time through looking at the way in which they operate on their time currently. And I try to figure out ways in which I can basically say, look, I don't need you to do that for yourself. We have tools, we have resources, we have folks available to you. We can meet you at the cost of what makes the most sense for you. We don't necessarily have to require you to invest in a 20 or a 40 hour per week type of relationship or a large monthly retainer. In fact, our whole business model is we'll meet you at the hours that you need. And as a result, our number one threshold is, did we buy back your time? Did we free you up from something that you felt responsible for so that you could now focus on something else that you felt even more responsible for, but just haven't been getting to because you've had all these other obligations? Yeah. That to me is what Well Aware is all about.
I love it. I can't help but just dovetail, and I want to get your thoughts on this, but I think it was Bill Gates that said, busy is the new stupid. And it feels like, as a society, and I am guilty of this as a business person, that staying busy, I feel like I'm accomplishing something, when it really just comes down to knocking down the 2 or 3 big dominoes. But I would imagine you deal with a lot of people that have a pride of being very, very busy. It's part of their identity.
I stand with them, right? Busyness is a drug. Yeah. And we like to get the dopamine effects of feeling like we're in a rush. One of my favorite lessons from a perspective of self-awareness is fear and excitement play to the same nervous system components in our brain. And so typically our anxiety and our sense of pressure motivates us. And we sort of like to carry ourselves through that ride. It's almost as if we're, on a thrill ride. It's a roller coaster journey, but we're on the fun part, right? Yeah. It's when we sort of sober up for a minute and realize, like, oh my God, here's where I actually stand in the theme park that is my world of business, that I find myself lost and not doing well, and that sucks. And so you find yourself wanting to hitch onto the next ride, right? You want to get back onto the busy train. My one call to action there is always to be like, it's okay, relax, like it's not the end of the world. We all suffer for this. Yeah. And the challenge is to say, well, can we suffer for something that's going to provide a different outcome, something that's going to actually be meaningful for us?
Yeah. I love that. I'm going to steal that. Busyness is a drug. I'm just going to shamelessly steal that. So tell me about your path to launching Well Aware. in your bio, you had this unique approach that you were pretty young. You diagnosed with with one kidney, medical condition, I guess, and then of course, you were going to have probably less time just by the nature of it with your father than a lot of younger people would. So, how did that all, I guess, synthesize into you saying, "I want to do this for a living"?
Yeah, there is a lot to kind of bridge there in terms of context. So
Yeah.
I grew up very focused around STEM. My father, who is a gynecologist by background, was already, kind of guiding me towards the field of medicine, and recognized that I, had the means to access math, science, and technology. And so that was his sort of push. And yeah, at the time when I was, not thinking about it as much, I also happened to, pay homage to the fact that my dad is actually quite old for my age,
Sure.
right? At the time I was a 16-year-old going into 17 years of age. Randomly enough, I found myself, going through appendicitis while in my junior year of high school. And when by the time I had completed that hospital experience, which was nothing too serious in and of itself, the ultrasound that I had done during that process of confirming my appendicitis ordeal, it revealed the fact that that I was missing a kidney, at least as far as they could tell, and that required further exploration. So, long story short, went back to the hospital. They did further testing, recognized that I had only one kidney, and that I was likely only born with one kidney, and that I also happen to have multiple cysts growing in that kidney. So I have, medically speaking, I have polycystic kidney disease as well as a solitary kidney, meaning just one kidney. And so one could argue, okay, what does that mean? For me, it really just meant go find out, because I didn't really know at the time what all of that was supposed to imply. Thankfully now it's been over a decade, and I've been pretty mindful of, getting consistent checkups and kind of minding the situation. Polycystic kidney disease is something that can progress in my later years, in my 40s and 50s, and can come to cause a lot of problems, especially when you consider the fact that I don't have a backup kidney necessarily. Yeah. And so I've called that my ticking time clock ever since I've been more and more aware of it. But at the same time, and this kind of happened in parallel, I was also just as mindful of the fact that, like, okay, here I am coming into my 20s, and here my dad is coming into his 90s. And as much as that old man is hard to kill, I recognize that that's not going to be forever. And he knows that too. And we're all playing on borrowed time anyway. But it felt especially real with him. So through that ordeal, through dad's influence, through, my decisions ultimately around what I wanted to study, I went to become a biomedical engineer. A lot of my time during my bachelor's degree was invested in, looking at my whole kidney situation while understanding the sort of career mindset around that type of engineering degree. And ironically enough, as I was finishing up my studies, I found myself more and more, at least at peace with what was going on in my own world of time and biology, and less at peace with what was going on with my old man, because it's not like he's getting any younger.
Yeah.
At the same time, I was getting involved with the world of business and the world of entrepreneurship, and I found a lot of interest in trying to curtail what I was studying in the biomedical space and somehow trying to apply it to the world of business and entrepreneurship. I ended up taking a very stubborn approach right out the gate, and decided, look, I don't have a lot of time. I want to be really successful. I want to do it now. I've got to show the old man. And so as soon as before I was even graduating from university at an undergraduate level, I was already trying to pursue some type of biomedical startup venture concept idea. I'll spare you the detail on that. It was a failure. But it was the genesis of my world into entrepreneurship. It led me to pursue a master's of business shortly after my undergraduate career. That master's of business ironically led me to go then study the world of business in specifically the form of startups, because, forgive me, master's of business does not teach you how an actual startup works. It teaches you how an existing business works.
Agreed. Yep.
And so lo and behold, I find myself in the middle of New York City at the young old age of 22, and I am basically thrown at the gates of what Manhattan does to people when they're young and dumb. and you lose a lot of money basically.
Sure.
And you also find yourself just awash with energy and spirit and pressure and stress. And I was trying to be the engineer, the founder, the guy who pays the bills. It wasn't working out for me.
Yeah.
So I got exhausted. And in the middle of my program with my fellow startup founders, I said, look, guys, I'm done. I can't do this. I can't do this because I just don't know how to figure it all out all at once. And forgive me for not having understood the word patience at that particular point in time in my life, but I just thought I wasn't moving fast enough.
Yeah.
So that led me down the path of asking a lot of the founders around me at the time, like, what do you guys do to make sense of your objectives and your focuses and your time and your obligations? Because some of you are much older than me, much smarter than me, have bigger responsibilities than me, and so on and so forth. And I just want to know how you've done it, because I'm clearly not. And that was really the spawn of Well Aware. That conversation, or those conversations, if you will, led me down this path of awareness that said, I'm not the only one suffering through this problem. I may be doing it in my own unique way, but I'm not the only one. And as I went through and started talking to those fellow founders, amongst other small businesses that I got a chance to network with, I was starting to realize that it was just nice having a conversation where someone would sit down with you and talk about this one particular subject matter, which was the time management process surrounding the overwhelm of business ownership and entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
The rest from there became me just saying, look, I've at the very least spent all this time at least getting exposed to the field of startups and operations. I'm done with my job. Let me see if I can help you out with yours. I became a consultant. I became a coach. It started off rough, as every entrepreneurship experience does. Sure. from day one. But it slowly led me to being a resource for others in terms of how they could go about managing their time and logistics across the variety of business operations that are required of them in order to run their show. And slowly but surely over time, that business service of mine expanded across the different types of operations I was exposed to, the different types of industries I was exposed to, the different types of resources and help that I found along the way. Virtual assistants became a huge part of my business just by the sheer nature of saying, I can't do it. Who can? Well, anybody who has the time, right? And where's the most cost-effective available time? Someone who classifies themselves as a virtual assistant literally is going to take, a very low hourly rate to serve you and your needs. Yeah. We can get into that business model in more detail later, but point being, that's how Well Aware came to be.
Wow. I love it. That was a mouthful, and I love it because you dropped a huge nugget in there that I want to revisit real quickly, because I have openly on this show and certainly in my personal life pointed the finger at academia and said, because I have an undergrad in business and an MBA, and I'm like, I don't think I learned a damn thing. And that's not true. I'm being unfair. Yes. I did learn how to run a Fortune 500 company and have, pretty, limitless resources and, very educated people working for me. And what they don't teach you is, okay, well, here's how to do it when you have nothing. Here's how to do it. That I never had that class. I had to do that on my own. School of Hard Knocks, as you well know, but yeah, you nailed it. They teach you how to run an existing company and how to run it well. But that's a whole different ball of wax than starting with a blank slate and an idea. And there should be more education around that. I mean, there is now online, but certainly not in the Ivy Leagues and the halls.
I think ironically, it's one of those things where it's like your scope of awareness at that time, and I'm going to use terms that I've learned a lot better now as I've studied marketing, your level of sophistication in the marketplace as a buyer of this type of knowledge is acute to what is directly in front of you, which in the realm of academia is business school, right? This sort of, let me just put that a bucket there and just call it business school. What you don't realize, you haven't had enough time into the market to really understand what sort of products you're purchasing. Is business school is for existing business. And for what it's worth, that is exactly what they sell you. But what you think you're buying at the time, especially if you're entrepreneurially minded, is you think, oh, this is going to help me run my startup, or this is going to help me start my own business. And the context is just enough there that you're sort of confusing the knowledge that's being presented to you in that space with the knowledge that you actually need to acquire. Yeah. And so you're left disappointed at the end of the experience because only after you've gone through that do you then make that association. You go, oh crap.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, and you can't go back to Nordstrom's. I'd like a refund, please.
You didn't know what you didn't know, and that hurt.
Yeah, exactly. They call that wisdom, right? They call that wisdom. It's very expensive. Wisdom is a very expensive lesson, but worth it in the end. Worth it in the end. This segment is sponsored by Rockbox Fitness Franchising. Take control of your destiny and join the boutique fitness revolution with Rockbox Fitness. If you're ready to make a real impact in your community and own your own business that empowers people to achieve their best life, then Rockbox is the opportunity you've been looking for. They provide comprehensive support from site selection, upfit, training, and turnkey marketing, so you can open your studio with confidence and a strong recurring revenue member base. Visit rockboxfitness.com and click on franchise opportunities to learn more about this exciting venture in the fast-growing boutique fitness industry. It's time to turn your passion for fitness and for business into a thriving venture. The well-aware way you define as health, wealth, and self, which I love because the business, the subcontext of this podcast is business, health, and wealth. So speak to the well-aware way.
Sure. So the well-aware way is somewhat of a philosophy on what things you need to account for in your operation of being a good human being. When I say good, I mean good in the performative standard. I'm not going to get into morals. You could be, really good at being evil, I guess. But so I'm using good in the context of performative, is just to clarify. But to that end, what are the three things that define performance? In this case, oftentimes we're going to look at health. Are you healthy? Are you able? Do you have the means to do whatever it is you're trying to do? I would say being in business requires a lot of health. Or at least it becomes tremendously tougher if you're not healthy.
Agreed.
Then comes the wealth side. Are you resourced? To your point, in business school, the expectation, you have unlimited resources, or at least a lot more resources than nothing. So wealth is an interesting concept to be breaking into as someone who doesn't necessarily come from wealth, if you're thinking about it from the perspective of a startup. And so you have to get crafty. You have to recognize, okay, there's being well resourced and then there's being really resourceful. So how do you go about acquiring or accessing or utilizing or leveraging wealth? And so what is your understanding of the resources that are out there that you can speculate on as both a buyer and a seller? I always like to think everyone here is a merchant at the end of the day. Like, go back to the ideas of like being in a bazaar and sitting down and being like in front of your store and you're selling your, like, picture that somehow in the modern day sense of whatever your business is. It gives you an interesting perspective on like what wealth is. And then finally, self, like, who are you? Where did you come from? Like, how did you get here? And how does your situation, as far as you can recognize it up to this point, how does that help you indicate, one, where you're trying to go, two, what might be getting in your way, what things that you may need. So self-awareness to me is such a critical component to recognizing not necessarily how to be successful, but how to even define success, because that's kind of where everyone starts. It's a relative position to know oneself and to know where you are. And then to say, okay, well, based on where I am here, tomorrow would be really great if I'm over there. And that, I think, is, in a nutshell, really important. And going back to our discussions around busyness, I think that's one of those things that we sometimes get so busy about not wanting to do, because self-awareness can be somewhat self-inflicting in terms of pain. Sure. It's a harsh reality sometimes to take in. And yet, I think it's the most important reality we need to have.
Yeah. I have a business coach that I meet with every other week, and she always starts with a grounding exercise where I just have to like chill out and, close my eyes, and that's the hardest part of the whole meeting for me, because I'm going, and I go right into this session with her, and I have to literally just sit there for about 5 minutes as we deprogram all, it's because I'm having to self-reflect, and she's asking me these, personal questions to think on and meditate on. And that's not easy. I'm going to agree with that. So you specialize in project management and time management. What are And we, I love this theme. Busyness is a drug. Busy is the new stupid. What are the common themes, Conrad, that you would see where people are making a mistake around this, and how can they avoid that? Kind of a two-part question, I guess. What are the common mistakes, and is there an easy way out, or is there just a start to get out of it?
It's a very interesting question. I want to start off by answering, like, what are the right things to do, right? I mean, everyone, maybe it makes sense in some respects to say, well, here are the wrong things that you shouldn't be doing. But let's say, what are the right things? Every business has to market itself. Every business has to sell what it markets. Every business has to serve on what it sells. That triangle is, if it's not on your calendar, something's wrong. If one of those components is somehow not on your calendar, something may be fundamentally wrong with your business. And if it's not on your calendar, it has to be there has to be some kind of department or asset or unit, some part of your business has to be accounting for those operations. Is sort of the beginning. Next to that, there are sort of two subsidiary functions, I like to say, which are finance and administration, money and time. And so amidst that triangle of marketing, sales, and service, you have finance, which is your money equation around what are you expending in terms of marketing? What are you expending in terms of sales? What is sales then revenue generating for you? Okay, how is sales then expending back again? Cost of goods sold, your difference there is, what your profit is. It's what you're making as a company. And then hopefully to a certain extent, you're then taking your service operations, you're somehow bringing them back into the marketing equation. So hopefully you're telling people that, either your clients are giving you referrals because you're doing such an amazing job, or you're hopefully helping them do that process. But you're sort of treating all of your service delivery actions as something that's going to ultimately help you back in the market. That triangle sort of, revolves around in that particular clockwise way. And so money accounts for the revenue and costs on each of those legs of the stool. And then administration is the process of operating all of those things, right? Because even the process of managing finances is an administrative cost. The cost of doing the marketing is administrative. The cost of doing sales is administrative, right? And I'll give you one of my favorite mistakes that I've been hounding on a lot of people for. Next to just not doing one of the three stools or two of the three stools or any of the three stools in a certain way that's supposed to showcase the sustainability of their business. One of my favorite arguments is, if you're going to do the work, great. But if you're going to ignore documenting the work, we're going to have a conversation later. You're not going to be happy about it. And I know this is a really tough conversation to have because it calls immediately upon the administrative cost question, which is, how much does it cost me to administratively document everything that I'm doing, such that I don't let things slip through the cracks, such that I don't fail to learn from my mistakes, such that I do have a clear history of how things are going. Again, going back to the self equation in the well-aware way, how am I doing? What's going on? Where have I been? Where am I now? That documentation is so critical. And a lot of people want to not pay for it. They don't want to pay for it financially. They don't want to pay for it administratively, meaning in time. And as a result, they perform actions. Great. Maybe some revenue's generated. Life's good. Okay, cool. But then at some point, something goes wrong. They get lost in that sauce. And now all of a sudden they're asking questions that pretty much translate to, where the hell am I?
Yeah.
And why am I not where I think I should be?
And they have to solve for that riddle. And they don't, and without documentation, without a trail.
Now I have to turn back the clock. Now I have to go, that credit card that you put down, if you will, on this administrative, lack of documentation, you now have to pay off that debt. You now have to come back to yourself and go, okay, what the hell was I doing last week, really?
Yep. Yeah.
And that's hard. That credit card's really hard to pay off because the interest rate on that is memory. God help you.
Yeah.
It's the reality that that time right now, you're still paying time right now. Time's still moving forward. So you have to not only catch up with yourself from the past, but you also have to keep up with the present. Okay, cool. That's a 2-person job. You're one guy.
Yeah. It kind of took me down the time-space continuum there for a second. I started to have a Back to the Future moment, but
welcome back to now.
Yeah, exactly. And we're back. Conrad, I would love to get your opinion on multitasking. Lots of controversy around this, right?
Sure.
Because everybody thinks, multitasking. your core business is to help people better manage their time. What are your thoughts on multitasking?
I'm multitasking right now, in the sense that when I represent Well Aware, I'm multitasking right now. Conrad Ruiz doesn't multitask. Well Aware does.
Okay.
I'm doing something right now. My team's doing something else. We're multitasking together.
Yep.
I can't multitask personally. Conrad Ruiz doesn't have that facility. But we as a company, because we're multiple people, and I say we, I mean not just the individuals, but the systems, the tools, the technology, we are multitasking together.
Yep.
But what I'm, the sort of the joke I'm getting at is that each of us are individually, when we're operating sufficiently and efficiently, where each of us are single tasking towards a particular objective.
Yep.
And ideally, we're really organized around the way that we are single tasking everything that's on our plate. And we're doing so within reason to the capacities of our time, the other commitments that we have that are both personal and otherwise professional, if we happen to have multiple other things going on in our professional lives. Case in point, multitasking is a myth. It doesn't take a lot of Google searches for people to tell you that. You don't need a productivity guru to sell you $1,000 course to give you that kind of notion or insight. The accountability may be really fantastic for someone to tell you that, stop multitasking, but sincerely, it is not real. I mean, if you want to, again, going back to the self equation, run a time audit. Go multitask for the day. Go be super really just document all of those things. But what you're going to find out, if you want the spoiler, is you never multitask at any point in time throughout that day. You single-handedly jumped from task to task to task to task. If you really broke down the minutes and seconds, which, for the sake of practicality, just do the minutes if you really have to. Just doing it for one day. This is an exercise. I genuinely call people upon us to do this. And great. Now recognize, go take a second day's experiment, if you will. Don't have to do it the very next day. Time auditing is very consuming. Again, documentation, it's a workflow, costs energy. Wait another week. Put together a plan for what you're going to do on that day that you're going to go do your time audit, and just be a lot more batched in your tasking, and recognize the context switching that you were doing during your sort of multitask freedom day. Do away with that and just try to give yourself a more regimented structure. I'm going to spend 3 hours on this. I'm going to spend an hour on this. I'm going to take time for lunch. Again, you have to be mindful of rest and all those other things. You're not just a worker bee. But check that out.
Yeah.
You'll see a difference. And I'm not saying that either way is right or wrong, but you're going to see a difference in the way that your energy responds to that. And that should tell you something about what multitasking really means.
Yeah. I asked that. I certainly a little bit of a baited question, just because I recently learned that, and I knew we couldn't multitask as a species, but they say Elon Musk, maybe I don't know, but we can't.
I'd say he's a great delegator.
Yeah, this is a good point. Good point. Or a hyper task switcher, right? But that when we get distracted, so somebody comes in the office, a Slack notice comes up, a Google chat comes up, that, and I can't remember the exact data, but it's something around 20 minutes or so to get back to the same level of focus once you're distracted. Right. We don't realize that's happening, but when they do their real studies and research, double blind, all that kind of stuff, it's like 20 minutes to get back to the same level of focus, which, if you think about our days and how much distraction we allow ourselves to have, this is horrific.
It's horrific, and I want to share, but I want to share 2 points of horrific. I want to share 2 points about why I'm horrified by that. Number one is that, to your point, we allow ourselves these distractions, and I'm curious to dive into why. Like, okay, we allow these distractions to occur. Why? What's in it for us? When you look at it again, it's the dopamine hit. It's the busyness is a drug. Love that quick notification email that I have to now go switch on over to. I love that. That anxiety, that pressure, that there's something that you're getting out of that. Even though once you sober up, you go, oh crap, I am now behind on the thing that I was supposed to be dedicating my time to, that I now need 20 additional minutes. Now I'm in a debt to that task. I now have 20 minutes just tacked on mentally that I now have to go catch up on. Yeah. That sucks. That's only the first horrifying thing, Roger. The second horrifying thing is how we feel about the debt. That's the thing that really concerns me. Yes, the distraction is terrible. Please, for the love of yourself, don't do that to you. if you can. And I get it. There's a lot of things against you on that. And that sucks. That's a whole other conversation to have as a society. But for just you, between you and yourself, why are you in such a hurry? What's the rush? What is so taxing to you that you have to punish yourself mentally or otherwise for being behind schedule in that regard? I just ask because I stop beating myself up over these types of mistakes when I make them. I sometimes get a little bit, critical, I think, with reason when I, repeatedly seek to the distractions. That's fair. I didn't learn from my mistake. But when I make the mistake, I don't yell at myself over it anymore, because why would I do that? What's in it for me then? When has shame ever helped?
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation, brother.
But it's to me, it's the self-awareness. It's the I want to be well, Roger.
Yeah.
I want to do something really tough, which is I want to own a business, and I want to be well about it, man.
Yeah. Not to go down that entire rabbit hole, but there's so much societal, I know what I want to say here, but we're taught that, the person that is the busiest and has the craziest life, they're the most successful. So we're programmed through movies and television and, everything, and just social media now, especially, that's the ultimate state, and it's not. But when you're fed that for, 20, 30, 40 years, you start to believe it.
Until proven otherwise. And even then, it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the flip side, we're talking about people that are, hyper motivated, very driven, and they've got to get control of their time, have time blocks and eliminate notifications and all that. But what about the people who are having trouble getting started? So, procrastination, they're having trouble actually getting it out of first gear and going, which is almost the flip side, but I have to think it's related somehow, right?
Initiative is a really interesting science. I actually need to share with you a resource by a really amazing mentor of mine who goes by the name of Joshua Spodek. He's a leadership and business professor out in NYU, and he wrote a book called Initiative, Step by Step. And I think it gets into what exactly you're calling for, Roger, which is like what happens if I'm stuck at that 0 to 1 level? Like, what am I missing if I am not if I'm not associating well with the calls to action that are online from an influencer about like motivation and passion, and if I know logically in my head that like, okay, if I just get things started, it will move, like inertia, momentum. I'm a physicist, I get it. I no matter how many different ways someone could describe it to you, I find it really interesting that there's a book out there that I found that actually dives into this one particular workflow, like initiative as a workflow.
Yeah.
And by all means, it works.
Wow.
So if anyone's struggling with that, I really, really strongly recommend you look up Joshua Spodek's book, Initiative, Step by Step. I know that may sound like initiative in and of itself, but hopefully your brain has gotten through the path of least resistance and you buy books but don't read them. And so maybe I got you that far. Maybe I found that particular audience. Like, all right, at least you're going to buy the book. That gives me a slight percentage chance. I'm playing a marketing game, right? Only a certain percentage you are going to close on this call to action. So be it. I get it. It's numbers. But hopefully some of you figured that out and make that commitment and open the first page of the book and get a couple pages in and get another couple pages in and hopefully find the answer there. Short of that, I think the real answer to procrastination, I hate to say it depends, but I don't know what your situation is. Like, what exactly are you procrastinating? Are you procrastinating trying to do something really, really big? Okay, like you need to start small. Are you procrastinating something because you don't have the right resources? Okay, like why are you missing the resources that you're missing, right? I want to assess, I want to audit where is the self right now? What's going on here? And then I can answer that question for you. Yeah. Not to say that this is me trying to sell a console. I'm just saying I don't know the answer to that question broadly.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the end, I definitely want to help them find you. So we'll put all that in the show notes. This segment is sponsored by Beamlight Sauna Franchising. Are you looking to take control of your destiny and own your own business? Do you want a great brand in a rapidly growing market? Well, Beamlight Sauna is a nationwide health and wellness franchise with amazing opportunities in select markets. You can bring the power of infrared sauna and red light therapy to your community while you build a thriving business. Beamlight Sauna offers support that includes site selection, build out, even pre-launch programs and turnkey marketing so you can open your studio with a large recurring revenue member base. To learn more about business ownership and franchise opportunities in the fast-growing health and wellness space, go to beamlightsauna.com. That's B-E-E-M lightsauna.com and click on franchise opportunities to learn more. You help people master the clock. You help them align their life. You help them be, super productive, not feel busy, but be super productive. At what point do you see that crossover into burning out? Just you're so efficient that it's like a car running at 100 miles an hour all day long. At some point, the parts wear out.
Why, Roger, let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Why do routines need to last forever?
They don't.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So why do people, and this is one of my favorite, I've loved this. I actually took this from a guy who quit smoking. He was actually using procrastination to his benefit, and I loved it. It really just, I went after it after he explained to me. He said, I quit smoking. I said, how? He said, well, I've been smoking for years, but I've also been procrastinating a lot of things for years. And I realized that the logic behind my procrastination was, I'll get to it tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And so he said, for quitting smoking, he said, I'll get to it tomorrow. Not today, I'll do it tomorrow. Yeah. He procrastinated his own worst behavior. And that eventually led him to procrastinating to the point where he was effectively quitting smoking, right? Withdrawal was its own demons, of course, but
sure.
Okay, cool. Same process. If I'm committed to performing this one particular routine of mine that I need to commit to, why am I presenting myself as committing to it forever? Like, I procrastinate things on the daily by saying I'll get to it tomorrow. And I think as a result, I never recognize that in my procrastination, I'm on a 365-day streak of procrastination. I'm on a 365 day of continuing to perform the behavior, the routine that I'm otherwise saying, oh, I'll quit that the next day.
Yeah.
So flip that for a second and realize, okay, there are things that I am on a consecutive streak for that I don't even pay mind to on a routinely basis. And those things change. So routines have a sort of adaptation to them. You don't have to be this machine monster. And I really make a call to action for everybody that I work with. Like, I'm not going to make you a machine here. If you ask me to make you a machine, I won't make you a machine. If you want to really be one, you will find yourself spending a lot of money with people who care to routinize you to all hell, and you will be so unhappy. But hey, okay, so be it. Like, there's a market for that. But it's not realistic, and it's not something you should expect. You will change your habits and behaviors and things like that. You'll exchange the problems you have now for better problems. There's still problems. That's okay. That's the point of sincerity there. It's like, it's all right.
You have a very, for what I thought was going to be a much more technical discussion on time management and how to use your calendar. You have a much more philosophical approach to this, which I really dig.
Roger, open up your calendar and share screen with me. We're going to have a fun time. It's going to get real down to brass tacks, but thankfully this is just a podcast.
Yeah. No, I'm just your approach to, I guess the topic in general is really cool. All right. So I always ask these questions. You've already given a great book recommendation.
Yeah.
And this doesn't have to be a business book, but is there a book that you've read, and I'm sure you've read 1,000, but is there one that you've read where, you set it down and it was one of those wow moments where you never thought about that particular subject or life or whatever the same way because of that book? Is there one you could recommend to the listeners?
Man. let me give a book that I think everyone should read, and then let me give a book that I think some people should be hopefully willing to read. If I may, I've got two for you.
Fair enough.
I already gave one, and I'm a rule of three kind of guy. So
there we go.
The book that I recommend everyone read, I call it Well Aware Bible. It's Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Berkman. Okay. You may also know it as 4,000 Weeks Time Management for Mortals, but the life-changing concept about time management for mortals is, I think, very stoic in nature. There's just not enough time to do everything. Get to terms with that. Figure out what matters. But that, to me, for those who are especially out there who are like, I am a slave to my productivity, and if I deter from that, it's like I'm de-worshipping my God, and it's going to ruin my life and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
dude, you're mortal. You're not a god. Stop trying to produce godlike results. In fact, enjoy their immortality. It is amazing. It is so freeing and liberating because it's finite. And so, like, Time Management for Mortals, number one book recommendation on the surface level.
Cool.
Let me take you one step deeper.
Yeah.
Robert Pirsig wrote a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It's a very famous philosophy book, and it's a healthy read. What I love about it, what it really, I mean, there's an aftermath book after Robert passed. His wife organized some collections of works and items and things that were ultimately helpful in kind of clarifying the message behind motorcycle maintenance. Which is, by the way, not a book about motorcycle maintenance.
Yeah.
For those that think they need to be a motorcyclist to figure out the book, the topic of that book and the collections that come afterwards are about quality. This sort of philosophy of quality, and I think what's so immeasurable to me in an expression of like joy and like value is, and it's ironic that I use the word immeasurable here. Robert tries to define the Western philosophical approach to Zen by describing and identifying the awareness of quality. And I think that is such a profound thing to write. Like, we all value things in our life, and we all, to a certain extent, I hope, we almost watch the way we value things, right? There's the things that it's the observer experience, right? And it's hard to step away from that first person. You can only imagine. You can, at best, you can really imagine it in someone else's shoes. Get into that all those kind of common phrases. But that awareness of quality, and what does quality mean, and how does quality look as a sum of parts, as individual components. The motorcycle analogy is played into on that in a very unique way, and it goes to show what dedication to those individual components and how they interact on the whole. Same way one would look at business and each of the individual subcomponents, same way one would look at life and the ways in which you have to pay mind to your abilities to eat, sleep, breathe, socialize, connect, be financially solvent. All of those individual components, they create the sum. Probably one of my crazy, and if it's worth putting a sticker shock on it, the thing that's really crazy about that motorcycle maintenance book is you go down the journey of this man's discovery through this ideology, and you realize he's slowly losing his sanity, because this is a crazy concept. Like, this is a lot to take in. And that's where I'll leave you there. Yeah. That there's something to be said about how stressed out we become trying to capture the whole, and to just put sense of it, and to get an understanding and a grip around something that we can't grip on, which is what the Eastern philosophers have said from day one. Don't try to hold on to it. It's not possible, right? Yeah. Loosely grip it if you can, but that's as far as you're going to get. And don't try to ask me to describe it to you, because the words in their own right are an attempt at grasping something that you can't grasp. So read that book if you're worth it. If you think you can figure it out. That's my ultimate call to action.
I love that. That's no one has thus far in almost 100 episodes recommended that. I read that 30 years ago, and it's probably somewhere buried. Either I've donated it to the library, it's buried in my library somewhere. But if I can't find it, I'm going to buy that again, because I remember it having a profound effect. But it's been so long that I can't remember the details of that book. And it was a guitar teacher that recommended that book to me. I remember that. There was a Mark Thompson was the guy that recommended me that book. So that's 40 years ago. I'm getting old. Damn, I'm getting old.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I got to revisit it, right? Memory. All right, couple last questions. So, and this one's a little different, but Conrad, let's fast forward to the end of your rich, fulfilling, beautiful life. Because as you said, every life is finite. And if your dad's history has anything to do with it, you're going to have a really long life. And we get there, though. We get to the end. And we're at your funeral, and you're looking down from above or wherever, and there's a loved one that's reading your eulogy. And that loved one is only allowed 3 words. Doesn't have to make a sentence, but just 3 descriptors, 3 adjectives, whatever it is, they choose that comes to mind that describes the life you lived. It's how you impacted them. What 3 words do you hope they choose that describe you?
I'm going to give you the 3 words that my dad tells me all the time, and that I hope gets passed down. My 3 words are a call to action. Take your time.
That's one of the best answers I've heard to that question. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'll let the audience just sit with that for a second. That's great. That's wisdom. All right. Last question, second to last question, because I want people to be able to find out how they can get a hold of you. If you have a magic wand, give you a magic wand tonight, and you're allowed to wave that magic wand tonight, Conrad, and you can make one material change to the world, one change to the way people are, the way the world works, whatever. It is, your imagination is the only limitation, but you only get away this one time and make one change. When we wake up tomorrow, if you wave that wand tonight, how is the world different according to Conrad?
I hate to overthink this and kind of get into the genie's curse of you don't know what consequences you'll bring when you make such a call, sure, such a change. I wish for a world in which everyone had I'm curious to see how close the world comes to this future. And I'm curious to see how closely I end up playing a part in this potentially. But again, I love self-awareness. And I feel like if there's one thing I wish I had more of in an acute way, I wish I had a device, an assistant, an agent that personal to me, privately, only accessible to me. I want to protect that, but I still, I can share it if I so wish. I want a system that works with me to remind myself and to help guide me along the following 5 things that I find more important than anything else I could possibly think of in terms of how to orient myself. I want a system that acts as an incredibly effective repository of my time and where I invested it. So I want a ledger, a bookkeeping, if you will, of my time, down to the second. I want a perfect Rolodex. I want a system that keeps track of my relationships to the most effective sense possible. Relationships across the board, not just relationships that I have a 2-way design with, not just clients, not just people that are close friends and family members, but also even just people that I'm aware of, right? That have somehow had an impact on me. Let's find an association between that time repository and that relationship repository. Those 2 things talking together. Mm-hmm. Let's then have a to-do list, an incredible to-do list. Let's not call it a list. Let's call it a menu. Let's call it a to-do menu. And it's just a repository, again, of all the things that I have done, will be doing as best as I can promise it. And it's just kind of it's a menu of all the things that I can possibly do, right? It's like a list of skills and things. And I could it just adds to itself as I've come to learn and process and operate on different things. It's just amazing action management system. Then I want, in a kind to that, I want a good project management system that's sort of, again, goes full circle with all these things. So I got these commitments that are going on in my life. And I want that to be all well and organized. I have commitments to my family, to my cats, to my business, to riding my motorcycle and taking care of it, and going to exercise into the gym and eating. I want to keep track of my projects, and I want it to be done well for me. For me is the key operative word here. And then finally, I want my library. I want my knowledge base to kind of just always be updating in a way that's helpful to me. I want my library to work with me and be like, Conrad, this is where you're, again, that sort of state of self. This is where you're at right now with all the things that you've learned up to this point. So one, I want the ability to kind of step in and out of that library as I so need, like, God help my memory, just, remind me. But then also work with me, kind of help me recognize like what I could do to take advantage of my particular knowledge set and help me expand it or refine it in certain arenas. And then just make all of that as necessary, acutely involved in my life, make all that, somewhat shareable in a way that's meaningful to others so that I can help them with their system, right? So if everyone had that track, if everyone had those tracks of theirs that they could keep an eye on and facilitate with, God, we'd be so organized.
I think that's called
the human potential would just be huge. Yeah. Right? There is something to that effect. Yeah, absolutely. Because the amount of data I'm calling for is absurd, right? And yeah, I think with AI as a facilitator of that access and Neuralink being just the interface by which we're able to, disturb at most the electrons to get access to all that data in a way that's meaningful to us. And cool. Yeah. I'm in for it. Let's all have it. I'm ready. Put me in, coach.
I love it. Most important question, Conrad, how can people follow you, get a hold of you, connect with you so they can, one, be part of your journey, but probably more importantly, call on you if they do need help in getting jump started or getting organized in understanding how to better use their time?
Grateful. Roger, I hope I'm well accessible on LinkedIn. I hope you can just send me a first degree connection request and let me know that you heard me through the ThriveMore podcast. I hope people can do that. My email is cruiz@wellaware.me. My website is www.wearewellaware.com. I would say those 2/3 methods are probably the most effective way to get a hold of me, or at least find out how to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Yes. We'll put those in the show notes so people can literally just scroll down and click it and be directed right there. Man, thank you so much. This has been a really cool conversation. And I have to say, for those of you that are listening on Spotify or Apple or one of the streaming services and can't see Conrad, he's a pretty young gentleman. He speaks with incredible wisdom, but he's not an old dude. So I just have to say, you are wise beyond your years, man. You really are. You are wise beyond your years.
Give it to the old man. He put me through the old man accelerator.
I love it. Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, thrivemorebrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.